Elliot Carter was the kind of billionaire people could talk about for hours, admired by some, envied by others, and endlessly scrutinized by those who thought they knew what drove him. At just 38, he had built an empire from tech startups that reshaped industries and defined new frontiers. But while his wealth was undeniable, it wasn't his billions that made him famous. It was his public persona as a philanthropist, a champion for social justice, and an advocate for racial equality. The press loved him. He was always in the spotlight, whether donating millions to causes that promoted equality or giving impassioned speeches about dismantling systemic racism. To the world, Elliot Carter was a progressive, a hero, a woke billionaire who genuinely cared about changing the world. He appeared at every rally, every benefit, every press conference, always standing in front of cameras with a calculated expression of empathy. He spoke eloquently about the need to fight for racial equality, climate change, and income redistribution. His name was synonymous with activism. The numbers were impressive. His foundation had funded numerous scholarships for underprivileged students of color, advocated for affordable housing in disenfranchised neighborhoods, and launched multiple initiatives aimed at dismantling the inequities plaguing the marginalized communities he often spoke about. Each charitable act was perfectly timed, usually coinciding with a major tech conference or media appearance. There were interviews with high-profile publications where he would quote statistics about income inequality and call out corporate greed, often referencing his own industry. He made sure to sound humble, to remind the world that even though he had amassed untold wealth, he was just another person, doing his part to help. But beneath the surface, Elliot carried a burden. His life, though outwardly perfect, had always been shaped by privilege, a privilege so ingrained it was almost invisible to him. Raised in a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of Silicon Valley, his childhood was marked by isolation. The house was full of luxury but devoid of emotional warmth. His parents, both successful entrepreneurs, had raised him with the idea that success is the only thing that matters. They had never encouraged him to question the systems that allowed them to thrive. In their eyes, wealth was simply a byproduct of hard work, never a tool for a deeper, more introspective examination of society's structures. This upbringing had left a profound mark on Elliot. Despite his success and the public admiration, he found himself constantly wrestling with an internal struggle. He had the money, the status, and the power to change the world, but there was a nagging feeling that no matter what he did, it would never be enough to truly upend the very systems that had made him who he was. He wanted to do good, he truly did, but every donation, every speech, sometimes felt like a performance, one he put on to convince not just the world, but himself, that he was making a difference. And so, in his quietest moments, Elliot wondered, was he really helping? Or was he just feeding into the very system he claimed to challenge, using his wealth as a bandage over a wound that could never fully heal? The gala was everything Elliot Carter had come to expect, polished, elite, and suffocating in its opulence. In this upscale neighborhood, the air was thick with the subtle arrogance of wealth, each guest performing their part. Elliot had come prepared with his best woke persona, smiling for the cameras, giving donations to social causes, and delivering his rehearsed speeches on racial justice. He knew how to play the part of the progressive billionaire. As he navigated the crowd, greeting fellow philanthropists and corporate magnates, Elliot's eyes landed on Marcus Rivers, a community organizer known for his blunt and unapologetic stance on racial inequality. Marcus, in his plain suit and sharp eyes, seemed out of place amidst the polished crowd. But to Elliot, it was just another opportunity to show his commitment to the cause. Elliot approached Marcus with a practiced smile, extending his hand. "It's good to see someone so passionate about change," he said, his voice smooth with the kind of patronizing enthusiasm he'd perfected. "I admire your work." Marcus hesitated before shaking his hand, his eyes assessing Elliot with a cool, calculating gaze. "It's not enough to donate a check or show up to events like this," he said, his voice calm but cutting. "It's about doing the real work, the kind that doesn't make you a hero in front of cameras." Elliot's smile faltered. It wasn't the first time someone had accused him of using his wealth for image building, but it still stung. "So, you're saying that people like me, people who are actually trying to make a difference," he began, his tone turning defensive. Marcus's eyes narrowed. What I'm saying is that real change comes from dismantling the systems that perpetuate inequality, not from corporate charity. You, with all your millions, might be part of the problem and not even realize it. Elliot felt a knot form in his stomach. The comment was simple but harsh, and it shook him more than he wanted to admit. He had spent so much time selling the image of the benevolent billionaire that he had never stopped to ask if the changes he was funding were enough, or if they were even real. Marcus turned to walk away, but Elliot's frustration flared. "I'm just doing what I can," he snapped, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "I don't need to be lectured by someone who doesn't understand the complexities of the system." The room fell silent for a brief moment. Elliot felt the weight of the moment sink in as the first whispers began to spread. What he thought was a small disagreement was already being interpreted as a racially insensitive remark. The tension in the air was palpable. As the evening progressed, the incident began to spiral, amplified by gossip and whispers. Elliot's words were no longer just a conversation, they were a controversy. A scandal had been born, one that would soon shake his carefully constructed image. What he had dismissed as a minor altercation was now a public reckoning, one that threatened to expose not just his words, but his deeper hypocrisy. The fallout from Elliot Carter's words spread like wildfire. The seemingly innocuous exchange at the gala quickly exploded into a full-blown media scandal. Within hours, clips of the confrontation were all over social media, fueling outrage from activists and critics alike. The hashtag #WokeBillionaireExposed began trending. Elliot, once hailed as a progressive hero, was now the target of widespread backlash. News outlets pounced on the story, dissecting every detail. Headlines blared, "Tech billionaire Elliot Carter accused of racism, philanthropist or hypocrite? Carter's image crumbles, and billionaire's woke act implodes." Some defended him, claiming his words were taken out of context or that Marcus had provoked him. They pointed to Elliot's millions in donations and activism as proof of his good intentions, but the louder voices came from those who saw his actions as the height of hypocrisy. Critics resurfaced old footage, revealing moments where Elliot's behavior had contradicted the values he claimed to promote. A 2018 interview surfaced where he dismissed concerns about systemic racism, calling them overblown and divisive. Another video showed him dodging tough questions on racial disparities in tech, offering vague statements about global solutions rather than addressing the root issues. Flashbacks hit Elliot like a freight train. He'd spent years positioning himself as a leader in the fight for racial justice, but now he couldn't help but wonder if it was all for show. Had he truly believed in the causes he championed, or had he been using them as a way to bolster his own image? The private jet he used to fly to poverty-stricken countries to raise awareness now seemed deeply ironic. His philanthropic efforts suddenly felt like a mask, a convenient way to ease his own guilt while contributing little to real, lasting change. Elliot's phone rang non-stop. Vanessa, his PR manager, was the first to reach him. "Elliot, we need a statement." "Now," she said, urgency in her voice. "This is getting out of hand." Vanessa suggested a heartfelt apology, possibly a video message where Elliot could express regret and empathy, but Elliot hesitated. He didn't feel he had done anything that warranted such a response. "Do they really want me to just apologize for something I didn't mean?" he asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "It's not about what you meant," Vanessa replied sharply. "It's about what people think you meant. You have to own this." Meanwhile, his lawyer, Greg, offered a different approach. "Downplay the incident, focus on your positive contributions. We'll shift the narrative back to your charitable work and make this a misunderstanding." But Elliot wasn't sure. The conflict inside him mirrored the struggle within his team. Some wanted to downplay the situation, others urged a full apology. The pressure was mounting, and Elliot realized that the image he had spent years crafting was unraveling. The media storm only intensified, with more articles questioning his sincerity and the contradictions between his public persona and private actions. It was no longer about what he had said, it was about what he represented, or what people now believed he represented. The question wasn't just what did he mean, but what kind of man was Elliot Carter, really? Caught between his own guilt and the mounting pressure, Elliot knew one thing: this scandal would change everything. and he wasn't sure if there was any way to save the image he had built. Elliot sat in his office, the weight of the scandal pressing on him. The media storm hadn't let up, and neither had his inner turmoil. He had spent his life building an image of the woke billionaire, championing social justice and equality, but now, the cracks in that facade were impossible to ignore. The question kept gnawing at him: had he truly been part of the solution, or had he just been pretending? It wasn't until a conversation with his old mentor, Jack, that the gravity of his blind spots began to sink in. Jack had known Elliot since college, when he was still an idealist with grand ambitions to change the world. The years had softened him, but Jack had always been the voice of reason, the one who challenged him to think deeper. "Elliot, you've spent your career donating money and holding rallies, but have you ever really asked why people are still stuck in poverty? Why racial inequality persists despite all the philanthropy?" Jack asked, his voice steady but critical. The words hit Elliot harder than he expected. He had never truly considered the bigger picture, the structural systems that kept inequality alive. His donations had been seen as a solution, but they were temporary fixes to a much deeper problem. Elliot's mind raced. He had been so focused on his image, so intent on being seen as the good billionaire who made a difference, that he had never stopped to question the systems that had allowed him to rise to the top. His wealth had been built on an unequal playing field, and despite all his charitable acts, he had never addressed the core issues. Meanwhile, Marcus, the man Elliot had clashed with at the gala, had become the voice of the larger systemic issues Elliot had failed to see. Elliot reached out to him, hoping for some form of reconciliation. But Marcus wasn't interested in a simple apology. "Your apology isn't enough," Marcus said when they spoke. "It's not about what you said. It's about the system you're part of. People like you don't see how your success is tied to the inequalities that hold others back." Elliot's initial defense had been that he was trying to help. But Marcus's words stuck with him. An apology wouldn't fix the deeper issues. What Marcus was asking for wasn't just acknowledgement, it was a commitment to real, systemic change. The realization hit Elliot hard. His public persona, his philanthropy, and his wealth all existed within a framework that perpetuated inequality. He had been blind to his own privilege. Now, it wasn't enough to donate money or give speeches. He needed to confront the systems of power that kept the marginalized, marginalized. Elliot didn't have all the answers. But for the first time, he was willing to look beyond the image he had built and face the uncomfortable truths. The work ahead was daunting, but it was the only path forward if he wanted to be more than just another billionaire hiding behind a mask of wokeness. Elliot Carter knew that no amount of money could fully undo the damage he had done. The scandal had revealed a side of him he had long buried, his own complacency, his blind spot to the systems of power that had allowed him to thrive. His wealth, once a symbol of his success, now felt like a reminder of everything he had taken for granted. The donations, the speeches, they had all been temporary fixes, not real solutions. Elliot realized that to make a true difference, he had to do more. Much more. One evening, after days of internal debate, he made a decision. He called a meeting with his team, his PR advisors, and a few trusted figures from his foundation. It was time to take bold, irreversible action. "I'm pledging $10 billion, he announced, his voice steady but filled with resolve. Not just to another charity, not just another short-term program, but to a comprehensive, long-term initiative aimed at dismantling systemic inequality." The room fell silent, shocked by the scale of his commitment. The money wasn't for temporary grants or research. It would fund a multifaceted approach to addressing the root causes of inequality: education, affordable housing, healthcare access, and programs designed to empower marginalized communities in ways that went beyond charity. Elliot's vision wasn't to throw money at problems, it was to work with community leaders, activists, and policymakers to create lasting, systemic change. "I'm not just funding projects, I'm going to be involved," he added, looking directly at each person in the room. "This isn't just a publicity stunt. I want to build something that holds itself accountable long after I'm gone." It was a monumental decision, one that would change the course of his life and legacy. The money he was committing wasn't just a fraction of his fortune, it was a major shift in his entire approach to wealth and privilege. It wasn't just about the optics anymore. This was Elliot's attempt to make a real difference, to confront the very systems that had perpetuated the inequalities he had long claimed to fight against. As news of his decision broke, the reactions were mixed. Some praised him for his boldness, for stepping up in a way few people ever would. Others questioned the sincerity of his actions, wondering if it was simply another way to buy his redemption. But Elliot wasn't concerned with public opinion anymore. This was about something deeper, something personal. He had spent too long hiding behind his public image, behind donations that didn't challenge the systems in place. Now, he was ready to face those systems head-on. Over the next several months, Elliot worked tirelessly to ensure that his initiative wasn't just another corporate gimmick. He spent time with the communities he had once only visited for photo ops. He listened to the people who had been on the front lines of fighting racial inequality for decades. And he confronted his own biases, learning from those who had always seen the world for what it truly was. The journey was far from easy. There were setbacks, criticism, and moments of doubt. But Elliot remained committed. The scandal, which had initially threatened to destroy him, became the catalyst for his transformation. He had learned that doing good wasn't about the image you projected, but about confronting the uncomfortable truths about the systems that shaped the world, and your role in them. In the end, Elliot knew that he could never fully undo the harm of his past. But he had taken the first real step toward becoming the person he had once only pretended to be. And that, he realized, was the true meaning of redemption.